In 1965, American car culture was roaring at full throttle. Horsepower was cheap, cars were bigger than ever, and chrome ruled the streets. But while automakers obsessed over style and speed, they left one thing on the cutting room floor: safety. This was the year before government safety regulations really kicked in. Seatbelts were still optional. Dashboards were solid steel. Steering columns turned into spears on impact. Car makers were too busy pumping out muscle and flash to care if their vehicles could survive a crash or protect the people inside. Here are 11 of the most dangerously designed American cars of 1965. Rolling steel traps that prioritize style over survival.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 11. The mid-1960s saw American automakers chasing size, flash, and horsepower, often at the expense of safety. The 1965 Dodge Polara is a prime example of this trend. With its enormous proportions, soft suspension, and minimal crash protection, the Polara was built to float down highways, not to survive impacts. In an era just before federal safety regulations began reshaping automotive design, the Polara showed how bigger didn't mean better, especially when it came to occupant protection. This lecture will unpack why the 1965 Dodge Polara, despite its grandeur and V8 power, was a dangerously outdated machine, especially in terms of handling, crash protection, and structural integrity. The Polara was Dodge's full-size offering, slotted just below the top-tier Custom 880. It came in multiple body styles: sedans, hardtops, wagons, and convertibles, and shared Chrysler's big car C-body platform. Its design was flashy and modern for the time, with long overhangs, slab sides, and massive chrome bumpers. Key specifications: wheelbase, 121 inches, weight, approximately 4,000 pounds depending on trim. Engine, 225 slant-six standard, optional V8s up to 426 cubic inches. Brakes, four-wheel drum. No standard seat belts. But behind that long, elegant sheet metal was a car that handled like a boat and offered little meaningful crash protection for its occupants. To the average consumer, the sheer size of the Polara might have implied safety. At 18+ feet long, it dwarfed compact and even mid-size cars. But in reality, the mass and length made it harder to control, especially in evasive maneuvers or emergency stops. The Polara had a floaty ride due to its soft torsion bar suspension, but this made it dangerously unresponsive at speed. It wallowed in corners and had excessive body roll, which compromised driver control. Over-assisted power steering meant drivers got minimal road feedback. Combined with the suspension's softness, the Polara felt detached from the pavement. Despite weighing 2 tons, the 1965 Polara relied solely on four-wheel drum brakes. These were prone to fade during prolonged braking, especially downhill or in emergency situations. When panic stopping from high speed, the stopping distance was long and unpredictable, making collisions more likely, especially in traffic. The Polara's side doors lacked internal reinforcement, meaning there were no crumple zones or side impact beams. In the event of a T-bone collision, the thin steel panels would crumple like foil, transferring most of the energy directly to the passengers. With no side airbags, which didn't exist yet, or padding, even moderate speed side impacts could cause severe or fatal injuries, especially to rear seat occupants. The rear end featured long tail fins and large chrome bumpers, but those were largely cosmetic. There was no true rear impact structure to absorb crash forces. A modest rear-end hit could shove the fuel tank forward or crush the trunk into the passenger cabin, especially in wagons. The convertible version of the Polara was especially dangerous, offering no rollover protection and a flexible frame. A side roll or crash would likely lead to structural collapse, with the windshield frame folding and crushing occupants. Even if a passenger survived the initial collision, the interior design itself posed dangers. Hard dashboards made of steel or rigid plastic could cause severe head trauma. Steering columns were non-collapsible, so in a frontal crash, the column could drive into the driver's chest. The metal instrument panel and sharp chrome trim around knobs and vents were not padded, Bench seats without seatbelts, which were optional, meant passengers became missiles during a crash. A compact car hits the Polara on the driver's side at 35 miles per hour. The door caves in, striking the occupant directly in the ribcage. Without a reinforced side structure or belt restraint, the driver slams against the steering wheel and door frame. A car rear-ends the Polara at 25 miles per hour. The big bumper offers minimal protection, and the trunk crumples. In a wagon, the rear seat passengers take the brunt of the force, risking neck and spine injuries. At 60 miles per hour, a sudden stop is needed. The Polara's drum brakes heat up instantly and fade. The car keeps rolling, unable to stop in time. The driver oversteers to avoid impact, and the Polara fishtails due to its long wheelbase and soft suspension. The 1965 Dodge Polara was a product of its time, an era where style, space, and speed were priorities, and safety was an afterthought. Its massive dimensions, poor handling, weak braking, and lack of structural crash protection made it a dangerous vehicle in modern traffic conditions. While it may look majestic today at a car show, its roadworthiness in a collision scenario was severely compromised. Number 10. The 1965 Plymouth Fury III was part of Chrysler's bold push into the full-size market, offering long lines, big engines, and loads of chrome. But while it looked imposing and could cruise effortlessly at highway speeds, the car's basic engineering lagged behind the demands of real-world safety. The Fury III was a prime example of mid-1960s American design that favored style and size over occupant protection. This lecture will explore how the 1965 Fury III's high rollover risk, underperforming brakes, and poor crash protection made it a risky ride, especially in a time when safety design was still in its infancy. The Plymouth Fury III was the top trim level of the Fury line in 1965, built on Chrysler's C-body platform. It was offered in multiple body styles: 2- and 4-door sedans, hardtops, convertibles, and wagons. Wheelbase, 119 inches. Length over 17 feet, 3,900 to 4,200 pounds. Engine options range from a 225 slant 6 to a 426 cubic inch V8. Non-power drum brakes standard, seatbelts optional, no crumple zones, no rollover protection. Though it carried impressive horsepower figures, especially with the optional Commando V8, the car's engineering did little to help the driver maintain control or survive a crash. Despite being lower than earlier 1960s Plymouths, the Fury III still had a relatively high center of gravity, especially in wagon and convertible trims. Combined with soft suspension tuning aimed at comfort, this made the car susceptible to excessive body roll and turns, understeer at speed, instability during evasive maneuvers. The risk of rollover increased significantly during high-speed cornering or sudden lane changes. Without a wide track or stiff anti-roll bars to compensate, the Fury III's size became a liability in emergency situations. The 1965 Fury III was heavy and only came with drum brakes on all 4 wheels unless upgraded. That combination led to several problems: brake fade during repeated stops or downhill driving, inconsistent pedal feel, especially with standard non-power brakes, long stopping distances, especially at highway speeds. A car capable of reaching 120 miles per hour with a big block V8 should have had more advanced braking technology, like front discs, but those weren't widely adopted yet. In emergency situations, the Fury III could not stop fast enough to avoid a crash, especially when fully loaded. The Fury III had a long hood and substantial front end, but no engineered crumple zones to absorb impact. The steering column was rigid, posing a high risk of impalement in a frontal crash. Dashboard and controls were made from hard metal or unpadded plastic, causing serious injury in even low-speed collisions. The doors had no side impact beams and were constructed from thin-gauge steel. A T-bone collision could easily intrude into the passenger compartment, with devastating consequences. Rear passengers were especially vulnerable due to limited seatbelt availability and lack of side structure. The Fury III lacked a reinforced roof structure, especially in the convertible variant. In a rollover, the windshield pillars could collapse, crushing the occupants. The bench seats provided no lateral support, and unbelted passengers could be ejected entirely. The Fury III's interior was luxurious by mid-1960s standards, but hostile in a collision. No padded dash was standard, sharp edges and metal switches were common. No collapsible steering column. In a crash, the column could spear the driver. Bench seats encouraged passenger sliding or ejection, optional lap belts only, and many buyers skipped them altogether. High body roll and soft suspension caused delayed reaction. Rear wheels lose traction, and the car fishtails into oncoming traffic. Drum brakes can't stop the momentum in time. Fury III swerves sharply to avoid a stopped vehicle. The high center of gravity causes it to roll. The unbelted driver and passengers are tossed around or ejected. No crumple zone. Energy goes directly to cabin. Steering column intrudes into the chest area. Unpadded dash causes facial and chest trauma. The 1965 Plymouth Fury III captured the styling trends of its era, big, brash, and flashy, but it was a rolling time bomb in terms of occupant safety. With inadequate brakes, poor structural design, and high rollover risk, the Fury III was more about image than engineering responsibility. Like many cars of the era, it predated the widespread implementation of safety technology and paid little attention to what happened after the crash began. It stands today as a cautionary reminder of the dangerous gap between power and protection in 1960s American car design. Number 9. The 1965 Mercury Mterrey was positioned as a premium full-size offering from Ford's Mercury division. With long, elegant lines, powerful V8 engines, and luxury-inspired features, it looked the part of a sophisticated family sedan or stylish cruiser. But beneath its confident exterior, the Mterrey was worryingly underdeveloped in the area that mattered most: crash safety. Despite its substantial physical presence, the Mterrey was structurally weak, offered no meaningful crash protection, and lacked standard safety equipment. It was a reflection of 1960s automotive priorities, where style, power, and comfort were paramount, and passenger protection was barely an afterthought. The 1965 Mterrey was part of the new Mercury full-size lineup built on the Ford C-body platform. It shared much of its engineering with the Ford Galaxy, but was dressed up with Mercury-specific trim and upscale interiors. Key specifications: wheelbase, 123 inches. Length, approximately 215 inches. Weight, 4,100 to 4,400 pounds. Engine options, 390 cubic inch V8 standard, optional 410 and 480 cubic inch V8 28 V8s. Brakes, four-wheel drum brakes, no discs standard. Safety features, optional lap belts, no structural reinforcements or crumple zones. While the car was smooth, comfortable, and powerful, these features didn't translate into occupant protection when the unexpected happened. Despite its bulk, the Mterrey's body was not engineered to manage crash energy. Key structural weaknesses included thin-gauge steel panels, especially in the roof and doors, lack of side impact protection, no door beams or reinforcements, unreinforced passenger cell, which could easily collapse in a moderate collision, rigid frame design that transferred crash energy directly into the cabin. In tests and real-world accidents, the car's large size didn't translate into better crash survival. The illusion of safety came from its mass, not its engineering. Like many vehicles of the mid-1960s, the 1965 Mterrey lacked basic safety equipment, much less any advanced protection systems. Notable safety omissions: no crumple zones in front or rear, no collapsible steering column, a major risk in frontal impacts, no padded dashboard or energy-absorbing materials inside the cabin, seatbelts optional and often not installed by buyers, no rollover protection or reinforced roof structure. The result? In even low-speed collisions, drivers and passengers were at extreme risk of injury from the car's own components: steering wheels, dashboards, door frames, and windshields. Let's break down the Mterrey's performance in likely accident scenarios. The non-collapsible steering column spears the driver. The unpadded dash delivers facial injuries. The rigid frame transfers impact directly to occupants. The thin side doors crumple instantly. With no side intrusion beams, the passenger compartment is compromised. Unbelted passengers are thrown sideways or partially ejected. No roll cage or structural reinforcement. Roof collapses easily on impact. High risk of occupant ejection if unbelted. Despite its size, the Mterrey offered no safer outcome than smaller, lighter cars in real crashes, often worse due to the force its own mass generated in an accident. Safety isn't just about surviving crashes, it's also about avoiding them. In that regard, the 1965 Mterrey had its own challenges. All-drum brakes, prone to fade under heavy braking. No anti-lock or brake proportioning system. Soft suspension and vague steering made emergency maneuvers difficult. Long stopping distances, especially when fully loaded. The car had power, but the driver often couldn't safely control or stop it in a crisis. Mercury designers emphasized style and comfort, but not restraint or impact absorption. Bench seats with no lateral support. Chrome and metal trim everywhere, creating sharp injury hazards. Glass and thin roof pillars added to ejection risk. Optional lap belts offered limited protection, and shoulder belts were rare to non-existent. In essence, the Mterrey's cabin was a high-speed lounge, not a crash-worthy space. The 1965 Mercury Mterrey is a perfect case study in the automotive industry's blind spot before federal safety standards were introduced in the late 1960s. The Mterrey's lack of crash engineering, absence of safety features, and failure to protect its occupants demonstrate how dangerous full-size American cars could be, despite their apparent strength. Today, it serves as a sobering reminder of what happens when aesthetics and horsepower are prioritized over life-saving design. Number 8. The 1965 Ford Galaxie 500 was marketed as a symbol of American full-size motoring, bold styling, long dimensions, V8 performance, and family-ready comfort. Yet behind the chrome grille and expansive interior was a car shockingly ill-prepared for emergency situations or accidents. Despite its popularity and impressive size, the Galaxie 500 offered almost no meaningful crash protection. It was a typical example of a pre-regulation American car that emphasized style and horsepower over safety engineering. The 1965 Galaxie 500 sat on the updated Ford full-size platform. It came in multiple trims and body styles, sedans, coupes, convertibles, and wagons, and featured revised styling with vertically stacked headlights for the first time. 119.2109 to 213.6 inches. Approximately 3,900 to 4,300 pounds. Engine options: 240 cubic inch inline 6 up to the 427 cubic inch V8. Four-wheel drum brakes, lap belts optional, no crumple zones, no headrests, and hard metal dash. While mechanically competent for the era, the Galaxie 500 was not equipped to handle emergency stops, side impacts, or frontal collisions safely. Though large and heavy, the Galaxie 500 did not offer effective occupant protection. Key safety weaknesses included unpadded steel dashboard. In collisions, the dash became a source of facial and head trauma. No crumple zones. The rigid frame transferred impact force directly to occupants. No side impact protection. Doors were thin and unreinforced. Steering column impalement risk. Non-collapsible, it could thrust back into the driver's chest during a crash. No rollover protection, especially dangerous in convertibles or during side curb rollovers. This car provided the illusion of safety through mass, but in practice, its outdated construction amplified injuries, particularly in high-speed accidents. One of the most infamous issues with the Galaxie 500 was the dashboard design. It was fully made of hard metal, without energy-absorbing features, angular and edged, increasing laceration and blunt trauma risks. Lacking padding or recessed components, which modern dashboards include for safety. Occupants, especially front passengers, frequently sustained head, chest, and facial injuries in otherwise survivable crashes simply from contact with the dash or steering wheel. For a car capable of carrying 6 passengers and powered by high-output V8s, the braking system was grossly inadequate. All drum brakes were standard, prone to fade after repeated use. No anti-lock braking or load-sensitive brake modulation. The Galaxy was long and heavy, making it harder to stop, especially at high speeds. Emergency stopping distances were poor, especially when loaded with passengers. Combined with vague steering and soft suspension, the Galaxy 500 was hard to control in crisis scenarios. Dash crushes knees and chest. Steering column impact causes severe internal injuries. Windshield shatters. Tempered glass sends sharp shards into cabin. Thin door panel caves in instantly. No internal beams to absorb force. Rear passengers unbelted, thrown laterally across cabin. Weak roof structure, especially in sedans and convertibles. No seatbelt enforcement, leading to ejections or roof crush fatalities. Despite its strong outward appearance, the Galaxy offered little protection in any of these scenarios. Bench seating offered no lateral support during accidents. Sharp-edged metal trim throughout the cabin increased injury severity. Lap belts were not standard, and shoulder belts were nearly unheard of. Rear passengers had no restraints at all in most models. Ford did little to address these design problems until federal mandates forced manufacturers to begin changing by 1967. The 1965 Galaxy 500 is emblematic of a time when car makers focused on performance and luxury optics, while neglecting the realities of traffic fatalities and crash survivability. Ford sold hundreds of thousands of these cars. Many were family sedans, used daily, often by unbelted passengers. Despite its popularity, it became known for frequent and serious injuries and crashes. Today, it stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when engineering takes a back seat to styling and salesmanship. The 1965 Ford Galaxy 500 offered power, space, and presence, but fell dangerously short in safety. Its outdated construction, poor braking system, and high injury risks made it a hazardous choice, especially for families. It serves as a clear reminder of how far automotive safety has come and how far it still had to go in the 1960s. Size did not equal safety, and for the Galaxy, that truth often came too late. Number 7, the 1965 AMC Classic 770, part of the Rambler lineup, represented American Motors Corporation's effort to carve out a niche in the midsize market. Known for practicality and affordability, the Classic 770 was intended to offer a slightly upscale experience within AMC's value-focused strategy. However, beneath its clean exterior lay a flimsy frame, unpredictable handling, and a lack of basic crash protection, making it one of the more dangerous cars to be in during a collision or evasive maneuver. AMC marketed the Classic 770 as the top trim level in the Classic lineup, offering slightly upgraded appointments and features over base models. Specifications: platform, AMC Senior Compact architecture. Curb weight, approximately 2,900 to 3,200 pounds. Engine, inline 6 and optional, V8, 327 cubic inches. Brakes, four-wheel drum, no power assist standard. Transmission, 3-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. Frame, unit body construction with limited reinforcement. Though efficient and lightweight, the Classic 770 was structurally compromised by design choices that sacrificed rigidity for cost savings. One of the most troubling features of the 1965 AMC Classic 770 was its compromised cabin integrity. Built on a lightweight unibody chassis, it lacked critical reinforcements that could withstand significant collision forces. Thin-gauge steel was used in the roof and pillars, no side impact beams in the doors, limited crumple zone development, leading to blunt force transfer to occupants, roof crush risk in rollover situations, especially in wagons and sedans. The result? In front, rear, or side impacts, the Classic 770 often collapsed inward, putting passengers in direct danger. On dry pavement in controlled conditions, the Classic 770 was tolerable to drive, but in emergencies, its vague steering response and unbalanced suspension made it borderline dangerous. Narrow track width increased body roll during cornering. Manual steering on base models lacked feedback at higher speeds. Weight distribution favored front-heavy understeer, especially in V8-equipped versions. Sudden swerves, like avoiding obstacles or correcting after a skid, could result in loss of control or dangerous fishtailing. The steering gear ratio was slow by modern standards, requiring several turns lock to lock, hardly ideal for high-speed corrections. All classic 775s were equipped with drum brakes on all four wheels, common for the time but ill-suited to emergency stops. No front disc option was available in 1965. Brake fade was a regular issue after repeated or extended use. With no anti-lock system and no proportioning control, the brakes often locked prematurely, leading to skids and loss of direction. Stopping distances were significantly longer than average for the class. When combined with poor road grip and narrow tires, stopping safely in an emergency became a matter of luck rather than engineering. While the interior was simple and serviceable, it was dangerously outdated in terms of occupant protection. Steel dashboard with minimal padding, sharp-edge controls, and protruding knobs. No standard seat belts in early 1965 production. Rear passengers had no restraints or protective cushioning. Rigid seatback frames increased spinal injury risk during rear-end collisions. The cabin was essentially a box of metal with glass and fabric, with very little in the way of passive safety. Despite its many shortcomings, the AMC Classic 770 sold reasonably well among economy-minded buyers. But in hindsight, it was dangerously under-engineered for high-speed driving. It lacked all the foundational elements of crash safety: padding, crumple zones, collapsible columns, effective brakes, and side protection. AMC strapped for resources, delayed safety upgrades until well into the 1970s. Today, the Classic 770 is remembered as a decent budget buy for its era, but also as a reminder of how far safety engineering had to go. The 1965 AMC Classic 770 was a product of compromise, built to be affordable and efficient, but not to survive a crash. Its flimsy frame, poor handling, and outdated safety features made it one of the more dangerous mid-size cars of its time. It serves as a historical lesson on what happens when structural integrity and emergency performance are ignored in favor of cost-cutting and superficial upgrades. Number 6. The 1965 Lincoln Continental Convertible was the embodiment of American luxury. Long, imposing, beautifully sculpted, and packed with prestige. It featured the iconic suicide doors, a powerful V8 engine, and acres of chrome. But beneath its stately facade, the Continental Convertible was a deeply unsafe vehicle, particularly in the event of a crash or rollover. Like many luxury cars of the era, Lincoln prioritized style, size, and smoothness over structural integrity, emergency handling, and occupant protection. The 1965 Lincoln Continental was engineered for comfort and appearance, not for occupant survival. 220 inches, 18 plus feet, approx. 5,200 pounds. Four-door convertible, one of the last of its kind. Body on frame with heavy steel components. 430 cubic inches in V8, producing 320 horsepower. While the structure seemed robust on paper, the convertible model sacrificed roof integrity and lacked rollover protection, placing it far behind even the minimal safety standards of the time. The Lincoln Continental Convertible was one of the last full-size four-door convertibles ever built by an American manufacturer. Its roof retracted completely, an impressive feat, but one with serious drawbacks. No roll bar or reinforcement. In a rollover crash, the vehicle offered zero protection from roof collapse. Removing the fixed roof compromised the vehicle's overall torsional stiffness, increasing flex and deformation in collisions. The folding top mechanism added several hundred pounds, worsening braking and handling. The convertible lacked upper door rail reinforcement, increasing injury risk in side collisions. If the Lincoln flipped, you were likely crushed, and it didn't take a high-speed accident to trigger that outcome. This was a car that weighed over 2.5 tons without modern braking systems. That made stopping in an emergency, or even during spirited driving, an ordeal. All drum brakes, no discs in front until later years. No anti-lock braking system, ABS. High center of gravity, especially with passengers. Poor weight distribution, worsening under braking. Stopping from 60 miles per hour could require over 200 feet, with significant brake fade after repeated use. Combine that with slow steering and floaty suspension, and the Continental convertible was almost helpless in evasive maneuvers. The heavy front end did not deform predictably. It absorbed little impact energy. Steering column was rigid and could spear the driver. Dashboard consisted of hard metal and sharp-edged trim. Long suicide doors lacked structural bracing. No side intrusion beams. Hinges on rear doors were notoriously weak. No fixed roof, no rollover bar, no safety cage. Windshield frame often collapsed, crushing the front occupants. Seatbelts were optional and rarely used in convertibles. Even at modest speeds, a crash could turn the Continental into a 5,000-pound blender of sharp chrome and steel. It's easy to understand why people loved the car. It was gorgeous. Clean slab-sided styling, courtesy of Elwood Engel, prestigious, favored by celebrities, politicians, and even U.S. presidents. Comfortable, smooth ride, plush seats, whisper quiet V8. Unique, one of very few four-door convertibles ever made. But buyers were enamored with luxury and overlooked the obvious dangers. In an era before crash tests and safety regulations, aesthetics reigned supreme over engineering prudence. While the 1965 Lincoln Continental convertible remains a beloved collector's car, it also serves as a case study in automotive hubris. It was a monument to prestige, but safety engineers later recognized it as an example of everything wrong with pre-regulation vehicle design. No crashworthiness testing, no emphasis on survivability, style-driven decisions that made the car less stable, less responsive, and more deadly. The Continental was quiet and smooth, but ironically amplified injuries due to its sheer size and lack of restraint systems. The 1965 Lincoln Continental convertible captured the spirit of its age, stylish, powerful, luxurious, but at a significant cost to safety. Its open-top design lacked reinforcement, its braking was underpowered for its mass, and its beautiful lines disguised a vehicle that, in a serious accident, gave its occupants almost no chance. Today, it remains a showpiece for collectors and vintage enthusiasts. But in a safety context, it's a relic of a time when form crushed function and when survival in a crash depended more on luck than engineering. Number 5. The 1965 Chevrolet Nova, also known as the Chevy 2 Nova, was Chevrolet's answer to growing consumer demand for compact, affordable transportation. It was light, cheap to operate, and small enough for city driving. But these very traits became hazards in the real-world traffic environment of the mid-1960s. In a collision, especially with larger full-size American cars, the Nova had very little chance of protecting its occupants. The 1965 Nova was designed to be basic and inexpensive, and it succeeded. Wheelbase, 110 inches. Curb weight, approximately 2,700 pounds. Body style, available as two-door, four-door sedan and station wagon. Engine, base 153 cubic inches in four-cylinder or optional 194 cubic inches inline six. Construction, unibody, lightweight, low cost. While unibody construction helped keep weight down, it also meant fewer robust structural elements, especially in the event of a serious crash. The Nova was built using light-gauge steel and minimal reinforcements in the chassis. Unlike more expensive GM vehicles, the Nova's structure was stripped down to the essentials. Thin door panels and roof pillars offered little resistance in side impacts. No side impact beams, not even optional. Crumple zones were non-existent. The car deformed catastrophically in collisions. Poor weld quality and structural rigidity often resulted in cabin collapse in major accidents. In a crash, particularly against a heavier vehicle, the Nova's body folded quickly, often intruding into the passenger compartment. Compared to full-size vehicles of the era, such as the Chevy Impala or Ford Galaxy, the Nova was outmatched in nearly every crash scenario. Front frame rails were narrow and light. Steering columns often speared the driver. Engine mounts and firewall collapsed inward on impact. Doors often buckled or flew open, even at moderate speeds. No support structures in door panels. High risk of pelvic and head trauma from intrusion. Minimal bumper structure. Trunk floor and rear seat back easily collapsed forward. The vehicle's lightweight made it especially vulnerable in multi-vehicle pileups or when hit by a full-size sedan, which could weigh over 1,500 pounds more. Though the Nova was small, it was not particularly agile, and its braking system left much to be desired. Four-wheel drum brakes, susceptible to fade. No power assist on base models. Narrow tires with poor grip. Loose steering feel and poor feedback at speed. Avoiding an accident often required sharp control input in short braking distances, but the Nova wasn't equipped to deliver either. Emergency stops could result in loss of control or slow response, especially if the vehicle was carrying passengers or cargo. In an era where large American cars ruled the roads, the 1965 Nova was at a significant disadvantage in mixed traffic. Collisions with larger vehicles often led to catastrophic cabin intrusion. Light rear end made the car prone to skids or spinouts, particularly in rain. Occupants could be thrown into the dashboard, windshield, or steering wheel during any sudden stop. While it performed adequately in low-speed urban driving, any highway speed incident spelled disaster. The 1965 Chevrolet Nova was a product of its time, an era when compact cars were being rushed to market to meet growing demand for economical transportation. But in the rush to make it affordable, Chevrolet sacrificed nearly all aspects of occupant protection. It was cheap to buy, cheap to operate, easy to park, but it was also unsafe at highway speeds, unforgiving in crashes, hazardous to driver and passengers alike. In hindsight, the Nova is a prime example of pre-regulation automotive design, when the phrase, "you get what you pay for," meant more than just missing trim or comfort features. It meant your life was on the line. Number 4. The 1965 Buick Electra 225 was a product of American automotive indulgence. A full-size luxury sedan, known for its smooth ride and imposing presence, it offered abundant chrome, a plush interior, and a powerful V8 engine under the hood. But beneath the elegant styling and quiet cruising lurked a serious problem. Safety and handling had not kept up with size and speed. While it epitomized the American luxury ideal of the 1960s, the Electra 225 was also a case study in the dangers of poor chassis dynamics and outdated braking technology. Overall length, 224.7 inches, curb weight, approximately 4,400 pounds. Wheelbase, 126 inches. Engine, 401 cubic inches, 6.6 liters. Nailhead V8, 325 horsepower. Transmission, super turbine, 400 automatic. Body style, 2-door and 4-door hardtops, shock sedans. The Electra's sheer size and weight gave it a commanding road presence. But this same heft created a host of dynamic and safety challenges, especially during emergency maneuvers. While the Electra 225 could cruise comfortably at 80 miles per hour, it struggled to slow down quickly and safely. Four-wheel drum brakes, inadequate for a vehicle of this size and weight with long stopping distances. Brake fade under repeated use, particularly on downhill grades. Excessive front-end nosedive during panic stops due to soft front suspension and rear-biased weight transfer. No anti-lock brakes or dual-circuit system. A single leak could cause total brake failure. In real-world terms, that meant longer stopping distances and an increased risk of loss of control in emergency scenarios. A dangerous combination with 4,400 pounds of mass behind it. The 1965 Electra 225 was built for comfort, not cornering. Soft, floaty suspension created a pillow-like ride on smooth roads, but wallowed excessively in corners. Significant body roll in turns or during lane changes. Steering was slow and vague, with a disconnected feel at higher speeds. Understeer was common in emergency maneuvers. Once it started pushing wide, it was difficult to bring back under control. High center of gravity made swerves risky and prone to instability. These characteristics earned cars like the Electra the nickname land yachts. They sailed down the highway gracefully, but could not respond quickly or precisely when conditions change. The Electra 225's combination of powerful acceleration and inadequate braking handling made it a hazard in the wrong circumstances. Braking from highway speeds often resulted in nosedive and loss of traction. In evasive maneuvers, such as swerving to avoid another car, the suspension could unload dangerously, making the Electra pitch and sway uncontrollably. In wet or slick conditions, the massive weight further reduced stopping power and control. Even though it was marketed as a luxurious and commanding cruiser, the Electra's actual road behavior made it one of the least forgiving full-size cars of the mid-1960s during emergencies. Though large and seemingly strong, the Electra's crash survivability was poor by today's standards. Cabin intrusion during severe frontal or side collisions was not uncommon. The lack of seat belts as standard meant occupants were often ejected or thrown violently into hard surfaces. The weight and speed meant greater momentum during impact, which could result in more severe injuries, both to passengers and to other vehicles in multi-car collisions. Its long, flat hood crumpled inconsistently, and the firewall was not designed to absorb impact energy, often collapsing inward. The 1965 Buick Electra 225 delivered prestige, comfort, and power. But those features masked serious safety flaws. It was smooth to drive in a straight line, quiet and composed on flat highways, eye-catching with its long, elegant lines. But it was also poorly equipped to stop quickly or safely, dangerously unstable in emergency maneuvers, structurally weak in terms of crash protection. In the end, size alone was no substitute for sound engineering. The Electra 225 became a symbol of a time when automakers prioritized comfort and image, while ignoring the growing need for occupant protection and dynamic competence. Number 3, in 1965, the Oldsmobile F85 stood as the gateway to Oldsmobile ownership. Positioned below the larger Cutlass and Delta 88 models, the F85 was a budget-friendly, compact option designed to attract middle-class buyers seeking old styling without the premium price. But beneath its respectable looks and low cost, the F85 suffered from serious safety deficiencies. Its lightweight structure, minimal occupant protection, and poor crash energy absorption made it especially vulnerable in accidents, a reality masked by its modest appearance and smooth marketing. Wheelbase, 115 inches, curb weight, approximately 3,000 pounds. Body styles, coupe, sedan, and wagon. Engine options, 225 cubic inch V6 borrowed from Buick, 330 cubic inch V8 in higher trims. Transmission, 3-speed manual or 2-speed Jetaway automatic. This was a compact Oldsmobile, smaller and lighter than traditional GM full-size cars, but its lightweight build came with real safety trade-offs. Unlike modern vehicles with reinforced safety cells and crumple zones, the F85 relied on a lightweight body-on-frame construction that failed to withstand significant crash forces, minimal side impact protection. The thin door shells lacked side beams or reinforcement. In crashes, doors often buckled inward, directly impacting occupants. No energy-absorbing frame design, the F85's frame transferred much of the crash force directly into the passenger cabin. Roof strength was minimal. Rollover protection was practically non-existent. Windshield and A-pillar deformation occurred in high-speed frontal collisions, often compromising survival space for front seat passengers. This car was not engineered with crash dynamics in mind, a common problem for early compacts that prioritize fuel economy and lightness over occupant survival. The F85 offered no real crumple zones. It was rigid in the wrong places and weak in others, meaning it didn't absorb or distribute crash energy, it transmitted it. In a 30 to 40 mile/hour frontal impact, the engine and steering column had no structured path to deflect or collapse safely. The steering shaft could be driven rearward into the cabin, increasing the risk of chest or abdominal injuries. There was no firewall reinforcement, allowing engine components to intrude into the footwell area. By modern standards, even moderate crashes could result in life-threatening injuries for F85 occupants, especially without seat belts, which were optional. The F85's cabin was designed for style and function, but not for safety, No padded dashboard in base models. Sharp-edged metal trim on glove boxes, steering wheels and knobs. Rigid steering column with no collapsible design. Bench seats without head restraints, increasing the risk of whiplash. No side head protection or energy-dissipating door panels. In any kind of accident, whether frontal, side, or rollover, occupants were surrounded by hard surfaces and unyielding structures. While the F85 was lighter than its full-size cousins, it still lacked the dynamic safety systems to keep drivers out of accidents to begin with. Four-wheel drum brakes were prone to fade under heat and pressure. No front disc brakes available, even as options. Suspension was soft and vague, offering little confidence in emergency maneuvers. Narrow tires reduced grip, especially in wet conditions. These shortcomings made evasive action difficult, especially for drivers used to the smoother ride of larger Oldsmobiles. The car might have been cheaper, but corners were clearly cut on road safety. In the early 1960s, automakers were not yet legally required to prioritize safety. There were no federal crash testing standards and no liability pressure for failing to protect passengers. Buyers wanted affordable, efficient cars, and GM delivered. Safety was seen as a low-selling feature, and adding safety gear added weight and cost. The F85 sold on brand loyalty, styling, and price, not on survival chances. Only in the following years, after Ralph Nader's unsafe at any speed and growing public scrutiny, would cars like the F85 be seen for what they really were, mechanically decent but structurally dangerous. The 1965 Oldsmobile F85 is remembered today as an accessible Olds for working-class buyers. But in retrospect, it was also a symbol of how far automakers were willing to cut corners on structural integrity and crash safety. It was affordable, reliable for daily driving, compact and efficient, but it was also structurally weak, lacking any meaningful crash energy management, filled with hard, dangerous interior surfaces, poor at emergency braking and evasive control. Ultimately, the F85 traded real-world occupant safety for mass-market affordability, a common compromise in the American auto industry of the 1960s. Number 2. The 1965 Dodge Monaco was a bold move for Chrysler's Dodge division. Marketed as a premium personal luxury car with a performance edge, the Monaco was essentially a dressed-up Polara coupe, offering more trim, more chrome, and more power under the hood. It was Dodge's attempt to compete with upscale GM cars like the Pontiac Grand Prix and Ford's Galaxie 500 XL. But while it excelled in power and presence, the Monaco failed to match that strength with competent handling, braking, and overall safety. The result was a vehicle that looked refined, accelerated with ease, but became unpredictable in emergency driving situations. Wheelbase, 121 inches. Length, 216.2 inches. Curb weight, around 4,100 pounds. Engines offered, standard 383 cubic inch V8, optional 413 and 426 wedgehead V8s, horsepower, up to 365 horsepower, 426 V8. The Monaco was a high-speed cruiser, capable of impressive straight-line performance. It could easily exceed 100 miles per hour and was well-suited for wide-open highways. But its size and weight, when combined with 1960s-era suspension and steering systems, created a dangerous mismatch between speed and control. Perhaps the most concerning flaw in the 1965 Monaco was its steering system. Power steering was standard, but grossly overboosted. Even at highway speeds, the wheel could be turned with one finger, creating a lack of road feedback. The system was also imprecise. There was a notable delay between steering input and actual directional response. In high-speed turns or evasive maneuvers, the vague steering meant drivers easily overcorrected or understeered, leading to loss of control. At a time when disc brakes, anti-lock systems, and traction aids were rare or non-existent, steering precision was vital. The Monaco simply did not deliver. The Monaco suspension system was built for comfort, not agility. As a result, body roll during cornering was excessive. The torsion bar front suspension and leaf-sprung rear could not keep the car composed under load. Sudden lane changes or evasive swerves, like avoiding a deer or another vehicle, could cause the Monaco to veer erratically or even spin out. The weight of the big block engine over the front axle made it front-heavy, worsening understeer and turns. Once the Monaco reached 70+ miles per hour, any sudden input, especially on uneven pavement, could cause the chassis to become unsettled. Combined with the vague steering, this was a recipe for loss of directional control. Despite its size and power, the 1965 Monaco came with four-wheel drum brakes, which were wholly inadequate for its weight and performance. Brake fade was common after repeated stops, especially when descending hills or in traffic. Stopping distances were long, even by 1965 standards. There was no brake assist system and no option for front disc brakes on the Monaco in 1965. Emergency braking at speed could result in lockup and loss of directional control, especially on wet roads. This made panic stops, a likely scenario in high-speed travel, extremely dangerous. Like many 1965 American cars, the Monaco was still behind the curve on safety. Seatbelts were optional, not standard. No crumple zones or energy-absorbing steering column. The interior featured rigid materials, including sharp dashboard trim, chrome handles, and a solid steering wheel hub. No side impact protection or headrests. This meant that, in a collision, occupants were subjected to severe internal hazards, including the risk of impalement from the steering column or impact against hard dashboard surfaces. The 1965 Dodge Monaco is remembered as an elegant and commanding car, a high-speed personal coupe with big V8 power and long-distance cruising ability. But it was also dangerous in emergency handling, lacking any meaningful safety features, over-reliant on power steering that diminished control, prone to brake fade and loss of stopping power. In retrospect, the Monaco represents a common flaw in mid-60s American car design. Styling and power were prioritized while safety and stability were afterthoughts. Number 1. The 1965 Chrysler 300L was the last of the iconic Chrysler 300 series, and it was marketed as a luxury muscle car, combining high performance with elegant styling. Powered by a 413 cubic inch V8 producing 340 horsepower, the 300L was built for speed, comfort, and prestige. It was sleek, powerful, and loaded with luxury features, a car that could cruise effortlessly down highways and deliver neck-snapping acceleration. However, despite its impressive straight-line performance, the 300L had a number of serious safety issues, particularly in terms of handling, braking, and overall stability in high-speed driving situations. In many ways, the car's design was built for looks and power, but it lacked the essential safety features that could make it a true muscle cruiser. Engine, 413 cubic inch V8. Horsepower, 340 horsepower. Torque, 470 pound-feet. Transmission, torque flight. 3-speed automatic or 4-speed manual. Top speed, around 140 miles per hour. The 1965 Chrysler 300L was not lacking in power. The 413 V8 was a strong, torquey engine that could propel the car to high speeds in no time. The car was capable of impressive acceleration, making it a true muscle car in terms of pure performance. However, the 300L's weight, coming in at around 4,400 pounds, was a double-edged sword. While it gave the car a substantial road presence, it also made it inherently difficult to manage during emergency maneuvers. The extra weight, paired with its soft suspension, led to longer stopping distances and sluggish handling responses, two critical issues that made the car dangerous under stress. One of the most significant issues with the 1965 Chrysler 300L was its braking system. Despite its massive size and impressive power, the 300L was equipped with drum brakes on all four corners. While drum brakes were common at the time, they were inadequate for a high-performance vehicle. After several hard stops, the drum brakes would heat up and lose effectiveness. This phenomenon, known as brake fade, was especially dangerous when the car was traveling at high speeds or engaged in stop-and-go driving. The drum brakes lacked the bite and immediacy that would have been expected from a performance-oriented muscle car. Even with the 300 liters V8 engine and power, getting the car to stop quickly was a challenge. At higher speeds, an emergency stop could be a perilous task. With its heavy weight and poor braking response, the 300L had a tendency to nosedive during braking, further exacerbating the risk of losing control. In a panic situation, where every millisecond counts, the slow brake response of the 300L made it especially dangerous. While the Chrysler 300L excelled on straight highways, it was far from agile when it came to turning, swerving, or handling emergency maneuvers. The car's massive 413 V8 engine was front-heavy, which contributed to its tendency to understeer. This meant that, in tight corners or during high-speed turns, the car was more likely to continue straight ahead instead of turning as intended. The 300L's suspension was set up for comfort rather than handling. The car relied on a torsion bar front suspension and leaf springs in the rear. While this setup provided a smooth ride, it also made the car less responsive during sudden maneuvers. When the car did attempt to turn or maneuver sharply, its soft suspension caused the car to roll excessively, further impairing its handling. In emergency situations, such as avoiding a sudden obstacle or swerving out of the way, the 300L's lack of stability and predictability made it particularly difficult to control. The 1965 Chrysler 300L had all the luxury and comfort features that one would expect in a high-end vehicle. However, when it came to safety, Chrysler cut corners. The 300L came with lap belts as an option, but shoulder harnesses were not standard, which would later become a crucial safety feature in cars. The car's body was built from steel, but lacked the crumple zones that would be introduced in later models. In a crash, the lack of energy-absorbing features meant that crash forces were transferred directly to the occupants. Like many cars of the era, the dashboard was composed of hard materials that could cause injury to passengers during a crash. There was no padding or energy-absorbing surfaces. The steering column was not collapsible, meaning that in the event of a crash, the driver was at risk of serious injury due to direct contact with the steering wheel. The 1965 Chrysler 300L is an interesting part of automotive history. It represented the height of luxury muscle cars, combining aggressive performance with sleek design and a smooth ride. However, its handling quirks, slow brakes, and lack of modern safety features made it a dangerous choice for the performance enthusiasts who valued speed over control.